You're listening to Archers FM on Cardiff Met Radio. We're students from Cardiff Met, and we're here every weekday between 2 and 3, bringing you the inside track on sport across campus and right across the capital. You're listening to Archers FM on...
Hello there, I'm Jordan Jones and I'm here today with Tom Pritchard and Ethan Harris, and today we've got lots in the lineup for you today as we celebrate International Women's Day for yesterday, and we'll also be checking out the latest going on with football at the Met. We'll also be looking ahead to the newly founded 100-ball cricket with Alex Griffis, and to cap it all off we'll be looking at Wales' ever-growing chances of winning a Grand Slam in the Six Nations, so do not go anywhere. But before we get stuck into that, here is your weekly sport rounder from across the campus from Ethan Harris.
Elliot Evans has been at Cardiff Met for a number of years now, and as the head of coaching and community at the club, the Archers' mainstay has produced results both on and off the pitch. His coaching development began a long time ago, in first joining as a student within the university.
Probably about 7 years ago, that's when I started doing my badges, so it's been a bit of a long journey.
Thank you, Jordan, and hello Archer FM. Here's your headline news from around Kincoid campus today. Athletic Archers take bronze as Sports Broadcast MSc student Joe Bryant takes home third in Poland. A Welsh rugby duo earn call-ups as Slecky George and Lawrence Smith earn their places in the Wales squad. And football comes home to Kincoid with the Cymru Premier back underway and the Welsh Women's Premier League looking to make its return this weekend. But first, we're on track with a start in the athletics as Archers student Joe Bryant has earned a bronze medal spot in Poland at the World Indoor Athletics Championships. The Great Britain 4x400 metre relay team finished narrowly behind the Czech Republic squad in the race on Sunday with a time of 3 minutes 6 seconds 0.7. The Sports Broadcast MSc student said he was proud to be part of such a strong team after a big effort from his squad on Sunday. Next, it's football, and the Cymru Premier made a welcome return last weekend, but it was not a happy restart for the Archers as Cardiff Met suffered a 1-0 away defeat to Haverfordwest on Saturday. Danny Williams drove home from the penalty spot just before half-time for the only score of the game, which leaves the Archers in 8th spot on the table with Newtown to play this weekend. Cardiff Met ladies, however, will be back in action on Sunday for their first game of the Welsh Women's Premier League restart. It's a trip to Britain Ferry Llansamble for the table-topping Archers, who will be certainly expecting a positive restart to their campaign and that 2 o'clock kickoff. Finally, we move to rugby news, where Met students Slecky George and Lawrence Smith earn call-ups to the Wales women's rugby side. George will be earning her 7th cap since making her debut as a 17-year-old, while Smith will be notching her 13th. And lastly, former Wales fullback and Cardiff Met lecturer Dusky Howell has called into question the equality of international rugby. The former Welsh international believes the women's game is being unequally treated amidst delays and cancellations, whilst the men's game continues as normal, stating the decisions in the game as disappointing as their Six Nations campaign is postponed until the spring. Well, that's all the news from around campus. I'll be back again at past with more. Jordan, it's back to you.
Thank you for that, Ethan. So an interesting talking point from the news bulletin there was obviously the return of the Cymru Premier. Tom, as someone who's a massive fan of the Cymru Premier, how great is it to see Welsh domestic football back again?
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's been a while. Been about 10 weeks, and yeah, it's come back. It's come back with a bang. I think we've all really missed it. There's been a lot of football on TV, but I think it's good to get back to watching the Welsh stuff again now. And back to hopefully seeing this exciting title race to close out the season. Obviously, TNS and Conisky Nomads both going at it. No one can really call it either way. So, yeah, and a very tight relegation battle as well down the bottom between probably 3 or 4 teams. So, yeah, it's great to see it back, and can't wait for it to see how it pans out.
And Ethan, it's probably been a season like no other. No fans at games, and they've had an enforced break, 2 months, 3 months without action. As a player, perhaps, how do they deal with that? Because obviously they've had a transfer window in January, but they haven't been able to play for their new clubs until March.
Yeah, it's been a very difficult situation for all the players involved. You know, they're going to have to keep their concentration when they come back. You know, they've had games to warm up, playing against each other. You know, Cardiff Met have been one of those teams who've managed to get some friendlies beforehand, and that's going to be the key thing, is how well do you bounce back from that break? How well do you keep your concentration? And I think the teams are going to show how they're going to do that.
And Tom, is a native of West Wales from Pembrokeshire. Jazz Richards has joined Haverfordwest County as well. Obviously, the Met played against Haverfordwest on Saturday. Just how big of a sign is that for the Cymru Premier? And probably from a Cardiff Met perspective, are they glad that they never came up against a Wales international?
Yeah, you've got to say that from a Met point of view, haven't you? But yeah, it's a big signing. It's one of the biggest, I think, in the history of the league, really, considering you know, the fact that he was in the Championship last season, played a good few times. Only 4 or 5 years ago, he was coming up against people like Eden Hazard and performing really well. So I think it's a big signing, and it's one which will hopefully sort of lead to more players of a similar standard coming through, and it's for the right reasons as well. It's not someone sort of late in their career sort of looking for a payday, that kind of thing. I think it's for the right reasons and just wanted to play for the love of the game, and I think that's his intentions, and it's a really positive sign for the league.
And Ethan, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who would we like to see perhaps follow Jazz into the league? Obviously, Ashley Williams has just recently retired. Should we get him out of retirement and then back into the league? Was there anyone else you think should come back?
Well, that's certainly an interesting case there with Ashley Williams. You know, I don't know if right now would be the immediate time he would do it. I think, to be honest, he's going to probably move into the coaching area. That might be the route he takes. I'd like to see more of Leon Britton. You know, we had a brief stint with Llanelli before he suffered an injury. We're getting him back now. You know, we've obviously got the big names like Lee Trundle as well. So there's plenty to choose from, and I'm sure there'll be a few more big names on the way. And
a reminder there that obviously the Cymru Premier is the only football league in Wales at the moment that's running at the moment. There is hope with the Welsh Government review coming on this Friday that there might be a second tier to start for Wales, both the north and the south. So keep an eye on that, because there's obviously former Archers involved at the newer clubs as well. Just another topic as well that we've touched upon is Dougie Howe was mentioning about the movement of the World Cup. How do we approach that then, that the World Cup has been moved for the women's, and how is it a detrimental effect to them, Tom, or is it a positive thing because it won't be competing with the men?
Yeah, I'd probably look at it that way. I think if you can get a separation from the men's and try to not sort of make it look like you're competing in that way, I think that's a positive. Yeah, I'd probably agree with Dougie on that one. I think obviously it has to be moved at the moment with the way everything's going, and I think if it can be on its own and they can market it in that way and separate it and say, right, this is it, I think that will only be a positive.
And one of her points as well, Ethan, was perhaps do players have the motivation to prepare themselves for another year, because obviously it's different. Sometimes they're working part-time, full-time jobs alongside their sporting career. So does that have a detrimental effect on their careers to have that?
Well, it's certainly something that has to be looked at when the men's game is continuously full-time, professional, and then for the women's game in Wales right now, it's a little bit different. But one of the points that Dougie also made with that is that she believes the delay would be disappointing, but that there could be an upside for Wales. You know, with the new coaching regime under new boss Warren Abrahams, that's going to give them time to come in, bleed the information that they want to relay to the players, and that's a positive for Wales going forward.
And obviously the Six Nations is upon us in the men's, but also the women's is coming up next month as well. Different format, Tom, but exciting to see women's rugby back as well, because obviously we've seen Wales women a few times.
Yeah, absolutely. Exciting times now, obviously, as you said, with the new coaching staff coming in. And yeah, it'd be exciting to see how they go. I think there were a few positive performances in the last couple of campaigns, maybe some disappointing ones as well, but I think there's a good base to build from there, and yeah, it'd be interesting to see now how the new regime kicks off in the next Six Nations.
And just to reinforce the fact there that Charlotte Wathen, the Welsh Rugby Union's general manager, has of course said that they are disappointed for the players and staff who have supported the development of the programme towards the World Cup in 2021, with that being moved. But ultimately they believe that player welfare and public health must come first at the time.
So thank you there, Ethan, for summarising the whole story for us and your news bulletins. That is very much appreciated. So now we'll go on to our feature. So, as Cardiff Met was one of our stories, they suffered defeat on Saturday against Haverfordwest, but one of their star players is now on a coaching journey. Elliot Evans has been a loyal servant to the Archers and has been studying recently for his A licence, the second most prestigious qualification in coaching. Ethan Harris caught up with him to discuss his ambitions beyond his playing career.
Community at the club, the Archers' mainstay has produced results both on and off the pitch. His coaching development began a long time ago, in first joining as a student within the university.
Probably about 7 years ago, that's when I started doing my badges, so it's been a bit of a long journey in that sense. So yeah, I've done it for quite a while now. Started off a bit at Cardiff Met, originally when I was doing an undergrad, and then worked for a sports coaching company for a little while, just taking PE lessons, and really enjoyed it, and that's when I sort of thought, yeah, something that I enjoy, you know, working with young players, and yeah, something that I want to develop further as well.
Couple of match, Elliot Evans! Coming to start up!
And focusing on the future generations is one of the many allures of coaching for Evans. Academy training has seen the Archers number 7 working with a number of young players within the club. Now, Evans takes one step further in his own coaching career. Completing his A licence and moving up the badges ladder is just another milestone in the creative force's future plans.
I think I want to work in football long term, so obviously you can't play forever, and obviously you've got to have something to fall back on when you stop playing as well. And if I want to sort of work in football eventually, I think coaching seems a logical choice. It's something that's grown on me. To be honest, I don't think I was naturally thought I'd ever go into coaching. Personally, I always thought I'd just be playing, but it's something that I really enjoy, and I want to go and do it, long term. I mean, coaching badges aren't the be all and end all, but they do, give you a bit of accreditation, and when you're looking at different types of jobs, they give you that sort of open some doors maybe. So hopefully it'll be a useful qualification to utilise in the future. But I think obviously the experience that I gained through the academy, that's the main thing that I see. That sort of getting out on the grass and working with players, that's where you really develop. But hopefully it may open some doors in future.
Evans has completed the main section of his coaching career under just one man, that being first-team gaffer Dr. Christian Edwards, and as a result there was only one choice as the main career influence for the Archers footballing royalty.
I think obviously Swanee's the obvious one as first-team manager. Worked with him for a long time, so a lot of the things that he does are maybe not copy, so to speak, but I take a lot of what he's done with me in the past as an individual and coaching a team as well, and try and take some of his better bits and do it myself as well at times.
The midfielder's role as head of community outreach has pushed his own personal development, and it's a position that is well valued within the club camp. But this is just the start of Evans' coaching journey, and it's one that is worth keeping an eye on to see just what the future holds.
It's obviously given me a massive platform to, not only as a first team player, go and develop in a playing sense, but also coaching wise, given me the opportunity as head of coaching in the community as well, doing that type of work. So it's given me a broad spectrum academically as well. So it's really given me a platform to go and sort of develop as a coach and as an individual as well.
Elliot Evans.
So thank you there, Ethan, for your feature. And of course, make sure to engage, to all our listeners, make sure to engage with our programme today. Get in the comments, tell us what you think of Elliot Evans, tell us what you think about the Met, anything to get off your chest. We're always here, and we're always going to hear the voices of our audience. So Ethan, let's get into the mind then of Elliot Evans. He started his coaching career now, and the UEFA A licence is just below the pro licence. Did you always see perhaps a coaching career for Elliot Evans?
Well, it's certainly something that he wanted to do. He wants to remain in football. As he said in the feature you heard there, that's one of the things he wanted to do, one of the areas he wanted to go into. Taking advice from Swanee, of course, Christian Edwards, that's one of the main influences of his career in terms of football and coaching, being under one man and one influence for so long. It's criminal if he doesn't take from Dr. Christian Edwards. But, this season he's been able to do that a bit more. He's been able to go out and work with a younger group of Cardiff Met players. And that's where he sees his future going into. Yeah,
and with that then, working with a younger age group as well, how are we going to see him transfer that skills? Do you see him in senior management or being his own man from what you've seen of him as a player? Or do you think he's perhaps one of the one that's always going to be in the backroom staff?
Well, he's certainly a talisman at Met, and you can see on the field he's definitely something of a leader, because he's the one who drives them forward, picks up the ball, runs with it. And I think that's probably what you might see in his coaching career, something where he doesn't want his players to be afraid of the ball. Get on the ball, go forward. That's one of the things, I'm sure he'll be instilling into that crop of younger players that he's currently working with. But to go back to your point of transferring those skills to the older generation, I'm not sure we'll see that for a little while yet. I think he's definitely got time to learn, time to grow in that role. But as soon as he gets there, I'm sure he'll definitely be one thing he's looking to do.
And that's the thing as well, is that sometimes we look at Cardiff Met, and Elliot Evans is still a young player as well. So the fact that he's doing his A licence at such a young age, a lot of these coaches, a lot of these players retire at 35, 36 and then go into coaches, but he's doing it alongside his coaching career. So with Elliot, then it's quite impressive, isn't it? This setup at Cardiff Met, that the players are doing their own courses, but they're also doing coaching courses as well at uni.
Definitely, that's one of the things that you'd hope wouldn't be detrimental. How do you find that split? I'm sure that's something that Elliot has to work out himself, and I'm sure he does that very well. But one of the things that you have to look at with that question is, how does it help you on the field? And I'm sure as a creative playmaker, that's something that's going to help him in the long run, being able to see the passes, see what the defence is doing, and work it out from there.
And also, he's pulled on the Red of Wales. We've seen him a few times play for the Wales C set up, and his national team manager, Mark Jones, has described him as the Dennis Bergkamp of the Cymru Premiers. Is that something you agree with?
Well, it's hard not to, really, isn't it? Perhaps Dennis Bergkamp is quite the honour, is quite the high impact, but in terms of impact on Met, you can't really disagree with that.
And you've seen him for a number of years. Just summarise for me, what kind of player is he? Like, is he this magician? Obviously, we've compared him to Bergkamp, but is he a player that can just change games like that? And he is a set-piece specialist as well.
Well, that's one of the areas that he's probably best at, is changing the game. You bring him on off the bench and, God, the tired defence, that's exactly what you want to do. Bring on Elliot Evans and he would absolutely wreak havoc. He's someone who's going to pick up the ball, drive forward, go at teams, and he's going to drive your team up the pitch, and that's exactly what you want from your creative playmaker.
And this season perhaps it's not been the season that Met want, and they're closer to the relegation zone than they are to the top six, which is obviously their ambitions. It's always been their ambition. With Met then, do we think they're going through a transitional phase at the moment? And obviously Elliot Evans is one of the last remaining pieces of furniture at the club, and he's having to work with these younger players now.
Well, that's one of the things that Christian Edwards has spoken about himself. He said he's rebuilt 4 teams essentially whilst he's been at Cardiff Met. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's a bit of a transitional phase again for Cardiff Met. They've brought in the likes of Kieran Proctor this year. They've lost a number of players in this season, including Will Evans, who was such a big part of their attacking force. But it's, as you said, it's been a bit of a difficult time. If you go from before the restart from last weekend, that's 4 losses on the bounce for Cardiff Met, and that's not the kind of results you want to see.
But hopefully the upturn in form does happen for Met sometime soon, and obviously as Archer FM, we're always going to be loyal to Cardiff Met. And another student that we're going to be loyal to this time round is Joe Bryant. Now, if you're from Cardiff Met, and particularly you know of the sport media and sport broadcast course, Joe Bryant is one of our students, but he's also an athlete. And over the last week, he won a bronze medal. Joe flew out to Poland last week to compete in the European Indoor Championships for Great Britain, and he competed in the 400 to 4 team relay alongside fellow Welshman Owen Smith.
Great experience. I think I loved every minute of it. I had my individual 400 heat on the Friday, where I had the 4-time European champion and 3-time world champion in it. So it was always going to be tough to get through. So I just thought, I'll take the race to him, and led the whole way. And unfortunately, he just came past me in the last 10 metres or so. But it's all a learning curve. And then in regards to the 4x4, it was obviously we had a fantastic team. We came away with a bronze medal, which we were well happy about. We were probably the only unsponsored team there, and we actually beat a couple of the big teams like Belgium and Italy. So yeah, we were really happy with that. There was no crowd there, which was a bit disappointing, but there was still an atmosphere in a stadium, as you're allowed to have your teammates in to watch you race and compete, which is pretty cool, and they were just making a hell of a lot of noise in the crowd. But yeah, I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, so an interesting talking point there from Joe, how he competed. Just your opinion, Tom. What's it like then for Joe to juggle being a student but also being an athlete? Because he mentioned on social media that the team he was working with, I believe one's a teacher as well. What's it like for Joe to be in that environment?
Yeah, I think it's a good sort of mix from a good balance. He gets to see both sides of it. So when it comes to maybe the media side when he's competing, and obviously the level he's at, there's a lot of that with BBC Sport. We're covering it at the weekend, and yeah, it's must be a good mix. So like he's not doing too much of the athletics, too much of other stuff. Maybe it's a good balance for him, and it allows him to have enough time to focus on one, but not sort of go too heavy on. And I think so far it seems to be working. He's had a very promising start to his career.
And we're actually seeing more sports athletes now actually go into sport media as well. Is that perhaps to get ahead of the questions that they're going to get from journalists, or do you think it's a genuine thing that more people are going into media as well as being an athlete?
Yeah, maybe a bit of both. I think you'd like to think it would be for the right reasons as well. But as I did say then, maybe it is to sort of get an advantage and trying to get an understanding of how the media works as well. So perhaps that is a reason. But yeah, I think it's a genuine sort of career option now for definitely when people are finishing. But we're also seeing that people, while they're still playing, current athletes and players in any sport are doing that as well. So yeah, it's definitely picking up, and I think that's gonna carry on and be a popular choice for players.
And obviously an achievement in winning a bronze medal is a great thing for any athlete as well. And it's only going to do him all the best in his Tokyo ambitions as well.
Yeah, it was a really good performance. I watched both of the races. And his first one, he mentioned the people he was up against, and he just did decide to, and you could see from that that he just took the race to the other two highly rated athletes and did really well, and definitely performed above expectations, and also in the 4x400 relay as well. It was superb. So, and for someone his age, it's extremely encouraging start to his career.
And just touching upon the Olympics as well, news has just come in that the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics are to be staged without overseas spectators due to COVID-19 concerns, and that's being reported by Japanese news agency Kyodo. How different has the behind closed doors era been for football and rugby, and how different is it going to be for an Olympics without a whole range of nationalities in the Olympics?
Yeah, it's a real shame, isn't it, just to hear that, especially with the Olympics when it's such a worldwide global event, and it's all about people coming from all over the world, coming together, and I think that's going to be a big loss. It's been a big loss to football and rugby, and I think certain teams have been affected by it more than others, and I think it's a real shame to hear that's going to be the case now. A lot of people, well, pretty much everyone will feed off that, the support of the crowd, and especially people who are maybe, it can help people overperform as well and things like that, and get them up to it, and it's a real shame to hear that.
And is there a particular sport perhaps you like when you go into the Olympics, like you wouldn't watch any other time other than the Olympics?
Yeah, something like handball is always good to watch, beach volleyball as well, just the things that you never ever see, unless you're a dedicated follower and you know where to go to see it. You're not going to see it other than the Olympics, but that's the real the real standout point with the Olympics is just the variety of the sports, and a lot of them are better than the stuff I probably watch week in, week out. Things like handball and fencing, really enjoy watching those, and a real variety, and just such a great event. But a shame it's behind closed doors now.
Yeah, for me, like, it's the variation of sport. I'm a massive football fan, but I love watching water polo and handball at the Olympics as well. And there's always, should football be an Olympic sport? But that's a debate for another day. But what we're going to go on to now is football. And with that, obviously, the South Wales Derby is just 11 days away. And this is the most... If you're a Welsh sports fan, you're going to look at the sporting calendar, and one of the two dates you look out for is the South Wales Derby. So, in the first meeting between the two sides, Swansea City won the last match 2-0 at the Cardiff City Stadium, with Jamal Lowe scoring both goals. Now, one of the biggest events of the sporting calendar is the South Wales Derby, and as mentioned, it's 11 days away. No side has ever done the league double over one another in what is arguably one of the biggest derbies in world football. So I'm just interested, from your perspective, Tom and Ethan, as a non-fan of either side, what is your perspective of the derby, and perhaps is it bigger than the Old Firm?
I probably wouldn't say it's big as Old Firm, no, but then I'm still not putting it down by saying that. I think the Old Firm is just on a different level, just anything in the world really, just obviously with all the connotations that we know with that, but I think it is really big. I think some people will play it down, and maybe because primarily it takes place in the second tier, and it's even been in lower leagues before that, but I think that's something to do with it. But I think it is a really, really big game. It's one I've always tuned in to as a neutral, not supporting either side, and one I really enjoy. And it's just the fact that no one's done a double is just one of those stats which is mad, really, and could have happened this time around potentially. I think obviously Cardiff's resurgence recently has been really good, and I think it's right in time for this derby. I think a few weeks ago, you would have called it for Swansea easily, but I think, especially behind closed doors now, no one knows, and hopefully it'll be a better game than the first one.
And Ethan, just with the South Wales Derby as well, I'd like to know your opinion. Do you think it's as big as the Old Firm Derby? You're a West Ham fan, the derby between West Ham and Millwall. You know what derbies mean. So how does the South Wales Derby rank in your eyes?
Well, maybe in Wales it arguably is bigger than the Old Firm. It's certainly one of the premier fixtures you look at when you look at the league fixture table this season. You'd think, well, the Championship definitely. It's one of those highlight fixtures. In terms of outside of Wales, though, I probably would agree with Tom, to be honest. I don't think it's as big as the Old Firm. The Old Firm goes back for so long and has such a deep meaning between those two sides. But, if you look at Cardiff City, as Tom mentioned, the resurgence in form is just at the right time. 3 wins from the last 5. Swansea also the same, but they've got 2 losses mixed in there. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on if you're watching this game. The form resurgence under Mick McCarthy for Cardiff being that main point. Of course, Cardiff have the most wins overall, 44 between that. and Swansea with 37, and there's been a draw 28 times, so it's definitely one to keep an eye on this weekend. Oh, not 11 days away even, apologies.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that if you look at the uniqueness of the derby, is that no side has ever done the double over one another. But it's also a case of where they've played in so many competitions, they've gone up and down the leagues. It's perhaps the Championship derby, Tom, one of the greatest, because they're both competing for the playoffs as well. This is what seems to happen with derbies, specifically the South Wales derby, is they're always chasing the same goal.
Yeah, I think it's definitely it's one I've enjoyed watching it more in the Championship. I think it's more sort of levelled out a bit more rather than one team has come up, because they haven't been in the Premier League at the same time. But yeah, I always enjoy it in the Championship, and like you say, it's always very rarely one of the teams down the bottom of the table. So it's always the meaning of it is right up there, and certainly this time around you just got to look at the league table. But yeah, really interesting. I think Cardiff could well be within a shout of winning. I think in the first game they were extremely disappointing, and I thought until a few weeks ago they would be Swansea to win comfortably. But I think anyone who knows now is and I think there's definitely a good chance of this double hoodoo continuing.
And it's certainly one of those fixtures where form probably does go out the window. But I'll give points to either of you if you can tell me the very first meeting between the two sides and what the score was.
I'm going to say, I'm going to stick my neck out on the line. Probably say it's a draw. And then
Pretty safe bet.
Yeah, in the 1920s perhaps.
And what about you, Tom? What are you saying?
Yeah, I was thinking around that time, perhaps like 1910 maybe.
Well, the first meeting between the two sides was on 7th of September 1912, and Jordan, you were right to put your neck on the line because it was a 1-1 draw.
And where was it played as well? Was it played in?
It was Swansea Town.
Swansea Town. So
only 2 years off from me.
Yeah, I still think Cardiff at the time had only just become a city as well, and obviously that's why we look at it now. There's two cities, and with that, then, is there perhaps a culture difference between Cardiff and Swansea? Because sometimes, we look at the Old Firm derby, and there's obviously there's a rivalry where it goes further than football. Is that the same culturally in football for the South Wales derby as well?
Yeah, huge. I think it's that Swansea, looking at the capital and sort of being proud of how they've been able to outperform them for the last decade or so, and whenever they can get one over them, and it's that sort of. Obviously, Swansea's not a small city in Wales, but obviously in comparison to Cardiff, so I think it's that wanting to get one over on them and thinking that it's such a big achievement every time. And yeah, the culture thing is very different. I think that's the big sort of dividing factor between the fans, I think.
And even have you ever thought of like what happens if we lose to them? Does fans sometimes go, I would rather draw against them than lose? Do you have that mindset, or you're like, well, it's winning or nothing?
I think many fans would probably say that they'd rather draw than lose to their biggest rivals. Losing for those bragging rights, essentially, just to be able to say, well, at least you didn't beat us, because that's one of the. If you lose to your biggest rival, then there's nothing worse. As a West Ham fan, as you mentioned, I couldn't imagine losing to Millwall. That would be heartbreaking. I'd very much rather a 0-0 or 1-0 draw than that. So I'd probably have to go towards not so much winning it or nothing, but I'd take a draw if it's there.
And do you think perhaps Cardiff fans should go for a draw with that then, because then he would avoid that first defeat? Because in maybe a double-edged sword for Swansea is that they win the South Wales derby and they also go on to promotion. And I think in the eyes of Cardiff fans, that might be their absolute nightmare.
Well, perhaps, that's one more for you to answer as a Cardiff fan yourself. What would you prefer? Would you rather go for that, take a draw and take the point? Or what would you prefer, Jordan? That's one for you.
Personally, I would take the draw and accept that Swansea going up. They've been a good side this season. A bit of luck recently, but yeah, they probably deserve a promotion. But yeah, as a Cardiff fan, I would always want to avoid defeat against the Swans. And if we were to be the first team to lose the South Wales derby, I don't think Cardiff fans would be able to live with themselves.
Well, that's definitely a one to go for the future, isn't it?
So we're just approaching the news now, and Ethan, I understand there's some headlines that have come in.
Well, thank you, Jordan, and hello again, Archer FM. I'm here with your sports news at past, and in the headlines today. Radical reform in football, as plans for a new look Champions League could be agreed by the end of the month. It's time for Team GB to rise as Hege Rees takes charge at Tokyo, and Bryson's Birdies leads to victory as DeChambeau pips westward to the post at Arnold Palmer Invitational. But first, we'll take a look at football and plans for a 36-team Champions League tournament reform could be announced later this month, according to European Clubs Association Chairman Andrea Agnelli. A radical change to the group stage of the tournament would see the teams play 10 games against varying teams, instead of the current method of 8 groups of 4. The ECA expects final details of the event to be finalised by the end of March. Continuing with the football, and Team GB are expected to announce current interim England manager Hege Riis as manager for the Olympic Games in Tokyo. The Norwegian will oversee the squad after winning a gold medal as a player in 2000 and also being assistant manager to the USA side, which won gold in London 2012. Then we move to golf, as Bryson DeChambeau has beaten Lee Westwood in a thrilling final round at the Arnold Palmer Invitational, held on a very tough Bay Hill course. The 27-year-old held his nerve for par to take home the tournament after reportedly being inspired by an encouraging morning text from Tiger Woods. The thrilling finish sets up a perfect appetizer to the Players' Championship, which begins this Thursday. In the tennis, and Roger Federer has claimed he never seriously considered retirement despite his 14th month absence from the sport. The Swiss 20-time Grand Slam champion will be competing in Qatar Open this week, which will be his first appearance since facing Djokovic in the last year Australian Open, with Federer saying the story's not quite over yet. And finally, in the rugby, it's a potential Females Lions tour, which has moved one step closer to becoming a reality after insurance company Royal London agreed to fund a study into the idea. Lions bosses originally held talks with the home unions about the possibility back in 2019, with managing director Ben Cavalier saying the tournament would be a case of when and not if. And that's your news at 12:30. Jordan, it's back to you.
Thank you, Ethan. So one of those talking points there is actually that there's a possibility that there's going to be a Lions tour for the women's team. There's also in football that they're going to appoint a manager for the Team GB team. So differing sports, differing setups. But Tom, as an avid Welsh rugby fan, would you like to see a Lions tour for the women's team? And do you think there will be a different format and different teams to play?
Yeah, I guess it would be nice to see. You'll probably have people asking why it hasn't happened already, I guess, with the men's been going on for so long. I think you would probably have to look at doing a slightly different format then, because obviously, you know, your best teams in men's rugby aren't the same when it comes to women in the majority of cases, so perhaps you'd have to play slightly different countries there, maybe somewhere like Canada, etc. But yeah, I think that, you know, it's such a, you know, so I'm trying to think of the word, but it's, you know, such a big event on the calendar, and maybe that's another good way of trying to promote the women's game and increase its stature and popularity.
And would you like to see it run alongside the same tours as well at the same time? Or do you think it should be at a different point in the calendar? But obviously that means that the landscape of women's rugby has to change to adapt to that.
Yeah, I'd probably be looking at, like I said earlier, with the World Cup, I'd probably like to see it on its own. I think when it gets with the men's tour, I think it'll just get swamped with the coverage that we expect. So I'd like to see it on its own personally, and then just gear everything towards that and make a big thing of it and try and grow it that way. That would be my personal preference. Yeah,
and I do think that's important to grow women's rugby in that way, and it gives us different talking points. It allows discussions to be made on who should be making squads, and I think that's what women's rugby needs in a way, is that you need discussions to have that, because then it increases their profile as well. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like I said, just have it on its own and just have all the fanfare around it, and just have everything geared towards it, and separate it as much as you can, and give it the best chance to show what it can do on its own.
And is there anyone perhaps you think should lead the women's rugby setup for a potential Lions tour? Is there anyone out there that stands out to you from Britain that could make an impact?
Yeah, you probably have to look at one of the probably the England head coach, just in terms of what they're doing at the moment, and then who you'd have with them. I'm not sure, but I think you could definitely have an exciting team there. Hopefully, you wouldn't want it to be too England dominated. But then, to be fair, the other home nations aren't exactly pulling up trees at the moment. There's a big gap between those two. So perhaps let's give it a few more years and try and level out a bit.
Yeah, and that's just an important thing, to put someone in there, and perhaps someone that we've looked at is Jasmine Joyce as well, who's a great player for Wales. Do you reckon she'd be a name in there?
Yeah, she'd definitely be in for me, just for the, you know, to get people interested as well. Like, the way she plays the game is fantastic, and almost every one of her tries I see is a potential highlights reel try. It's sensational the way she plays the game, and to have her on that tour. And well, not just for that, I think her ability would get her there anyway. She's absolutely fantastic to watch, and would bring a lot of attention and create a lot of buzz for sure.
So thank you for that, Tom. And we'll just go now to celebrate International Women's Day. And we're now a day removed from International Women's Day, but we'd like to pay tribute to women in our show. International Women's Day is celebrated across the world, usually on March the 8th, and is a day dedicated to inspiring women in society. It is also bringing attention to issues such as gender equality, reproductive rights, and also violence against women. So how important is it to have a day like this, Tom?
Yeah, it is important for sure. I have seen people saying in recent days that eventually, I think it was Emma Hayes was saying yesterday, a Chelsea manager, saying that hopefully in the future you won't have to have days like this where every day will be that day. But I think at the moment, I think it's definitely important to highlight it and make a real thing of it, and to show the importance, which obviously isn't coming home enough at the moment. And this is the big reason why we're having to have things like this. But it is important, and I saw a lot of great stuff yesterday. Just highlighting people in roles in the media, specifically to our show, who do so much good work and are very talented and deserve to be applauded in the way they've been. And it's it was a real good day yesterday. There was a lot of good stuff I saw on social media and various other places.
And that's the important aspect of this, Ethan, isn't it? Like we are males, so we can never put ourselves in women's shoes, and they go through a lot more than us. And it does come to opportunities, perhaps presenting themselves. And so, how important is it to make that day for equality as well, and getting more women into sport? Because we saw BT Sport celebrate International Women's Day by having a female led setup as well. So that's something important, and it sends a clear message that there should be more women in the sport media.
Well, it's vital to send that message, but I think the important thing to remember is it's not just about one day, it's about the rest of the 364 days of the year. That's the important part of breaking down that glass ceiling that's been imposed, and really striking through home that point that, this is about equality for everyone, and not just, highlighting it for one day of the year, but making sure that message spreads through for every single day that we go forward.
And Tom, we're touching on Ethan's point, and you said that about Emma Hayes as well, is that we need to make these days, we need to not have a day like this. We just need to celebrate women's sport and just women in general as well. And what I'd like to do now is to pay tribute to the women that have helped shape us in our lives, our mums, of course, and just everyone that has come in and helped us. I've thoroughly enjoyed covering the Welsh Premier Women's League for myself. I've done netball before as well, and I just really enjoy covering those stories because they're not told as much, and it's nice to build a profile from it. Has there been experiences for yourselves that you perhaps taken pride from in covering women's sport?
Yeah, I've done a fair few Women's League games as well, and they've been great. I enjoy them as much as anything else. As a fan of football and enjoy watching that. And obviously with being a big cricket fan as well, I watched women's cricket as much as men's. It's on TV as much as men's, which is great. I think cricket is one of the ones where it's ahead of other sports in that regard. I think that was confirmed yesterday. There was a report, and they are doing a lot more. And yeah, I love to watch women's cricket as much as the men's. It's a good standard, and a real big fan of it. And yeah, it's been good. And
Ethan, has there been anything for you that you've taken pride out in covering women's sport, or just women in general? Has there been a point in your life you'd be like, well, I'm glad that I've made an effort there?
Well, I've gone with you to some of those Welsh Women's Premier League games and covered them alongside you, and it's about giving that audience that platform for them to go and succeed as much as anything. And to touch on Tom's point there, some of the facts around that is cricket has made progress towards a gender parity, and the biggest gap is actually in football at the moment, which is definitely something to keep an eye on with how they go there. But of the 48 sports surveyed by BBC Sport, 37 of them offered prize money, so 11 of them didn't, of which only 3 did not offer parity at any of its major championships or events. And the biggest gaps for male and female athletes are in football, golf and basketball. Now, Sports Minister Nigel Huddleston said women's sport has continued to go from strength to strength, and it's absolutely right at the rewards match that's that success. And we've seen a significant levelling up in the prize money on offer in recent years, but they must push for greater participation, employment, commercial opportunities and visibility in the media.
So improvements still to be made, but there is an effort to improve that gap there. So continuing on in our positive way, we'd like to pay tribute to someone close on campus. So we'd like to bring you up to date with the league close to our league at Kincoy campus. So the Welsh Premier Women's League obviously made a welcome return on Sunday as Britain Ferry Clonsell held Aberystwyth Town to a draw at Park Avenue. But this coming Sunday we can celebrate one of our teams being back in action. So Cardiff Met are travelling to Old Road to face Britain Ferry One of the Archers heroes in Met's rank is Chloe O'Connor. So Chloe has an inspiring story of returning to football after being devastated by the discovery of a benign tumour. So I spoke to her in December as she spoke of how she made a return and her aims for the rest of her career. Lighting up the Welsh Premier Women's League right now is a driving force in Cardiff Met's pursuit for the title. With the Archers sitting proudly at the top of the league and with herself as joint top scorer with 5 goals, O'Connor is a woman on a mission as she searches for more gold. If you rewind back to 2018, however, it was a very different picture. The one-time Wales international was sidelined after a benign tumour was found on her spine. It required a lengthy operation which forced her into a long road to recovery. The Met superstar explains how she bounced back from her life-changing news to return to the football pitch.
I always had at the back of my head, I really wanted to get back into football. Not because just my physical health, because of mental health as well. Being around teammates, going to training, going to play games is nothing better no better feeling than that. Yeah, I think then July came and I was feeling really good. I did some ball work by myself and I was feeling really, really good. So I thought, you know what, I could maybe have a crack at going back. So I text Kerry Harris, the manager of Cardiff Met, and she's great. She's a great coach. She's a great person, and she welcomed me back and said, "No problem. We'll love to have you back," and sent me the details for training. And it just grew from there. Really, like even my first training session back, I was very, very worried and a little bit like not scared, but just worried about like tackling and stuff. Really, but I think when I overcame it, it was fine and progressed since then.
O'Connor and success go together at Cardiff Met. During her first spell with the club, she won 3 league titles as well as 2 Welsh Cups. She was part of the Archers side which went the entire league campaign unbeaten in 2016, scoring 115 goals and conceding just 14. Being together in university was the winning formula, according to O'Connor.
I think just being in university does bring us together just because you do a lot of things outside of football together, such as going to lectures, going for food together, going out together. And we really did have that togetherness as that team. And I just think that's probably why we did do so well in that particular season, because we were such good friends.
As a Bachelor of Science graduate in Sports Management, the university holds a special place in the heart of Chloe O'Connor, as it is there she found love of her partner, as well as learning some valuable life skills.
Cardiff Met University as a whole has played a big part in my life. When I first went there, I was completely different to what I am now. And you learn like lots of different things, like life skills, and it really brings the character out of you. So, but yeah, Cardiff Met will always be a great place for me. I've made friends for life from there.
Chloe O'Connor's story is certainly an intriguing one, from recovering from a very serious situation to then becoming such an integral part of a side that requires 110% for everything. She's proven an inspiration to many Cardiff Met athletes.
Archers FM, for students, by the students, at Cardiff Met.
Student media is a common theme in this show, and today we're going to continue the good work of International Women's Day from yesterday. So 2 students on our course, Darcy Morris and Gabriella Dukes, run their own podcast called She's Got a Goal in Mind. There are already a number of episodes and they've saw some great interviewees, and here's a preview of what they've done so far.
To She Has a Goal in Mind, brought to you each week by Darcy Morris and Gabriella Dukes.
This week we chatted to sports reporter and presenter Lauren Jenkins, Olympian and presenter Mika Moore, British weightlifter Sarah Davis, Welsh sports reporter and presenter Shauna David, ex-international hockey player turned sports reporter Beth Fisher, Welsh international rugby player and founder of Yogability Alex Donovan.
We hope you enjoy listening, and don't forget to like, subscribe and follow us on social media at A Goal in Mind podcast.
So make sure to listen to that podcast, and obviously it's available on multiple audio platforms. And obviously let's pay tribute to that, because obviously we're all about positivity here, and especially celebrating International Women's Day yesterday, Tom. So something like that, we need podcasts like that, isn't it, to just put a bit more attention onto women, stories that perhaps we don't know about them, and stories that educate people as well.
Yeah, definitely. I've really enjoyed listening to them so far, and there's been a lot of interest in people on there, and a lot of them who otherwise you wouldn't have heard of. So fair play to Darcy and Gabriella for some of the guests they've got so far. It's been really important stories, really interesting stories, and like I said, ones you haven't heard elsewhere. So it's great to have other podcasts where you've got popular people, but maybe you've heard from them before and you kind of know what the gist is. But this has been really, really interesting and really unique with the people they've got and the stories.
And of course, even former archer Laura McAllister was one of the people on there, and that's quite a big hoop, isn't it, to get someone on there that is going for such a role with FIFA and UEFA, to have her speak on there, and it's given her a platform to build her campaign for that as well.
Yeah, definitely. You know, you can't understate how much of a big coup that is, because for someone like that to speak on that platform, someone who's going to be gunning for one of the top spots in FIFA and in world football, that's amazing. You know, it just highlights how far those two have come and how far they've built that platform and how far they've built that podcast up. And I'm sure there'll be plenty more great features on that in future.
And we also have to give a shout out to Ali Hampson-Silk, who runs the Generation Sport podcast, and so far she's spoken to Ollie Lawrence, Tani Seagrave, Cade Edwards and Johnny Fisher so far. So make sure definitely to listen to both of those podcasts as we celebrate sport media here at Kincoy campus. So we're coming up now to celebrate another woman in sport, and that's cricketer Alex Griffis, who is familiar to many at Cardiff Met, and she's one of the many archers whose talents have given them the opportunity to play the sport that they love full time. The 18-year-old is one of the first players to be selected to represent Welsh Fire in the new tournament, the 100, which gets underway this summer. Tom recently spoke to Alex to find out how she got into cricket and the variety of experiences she's already had.
Griffis is without doubt one of the most exciting up-and-coming cricketers in Wales. In 2019, at just 17 years of age, she was given the opportunity to play for Western Storm in the Kia Super League. The right-handed all-rounder who studies at Cardiff Met had the dream introduction to the competition as her Storm team beat the Southern Vipers to win the final instalment of the popular 2020 tournament, which will be replaced by the new 100-ball competition next year. So, how was she introduced to the sport, and when did she begin to realise that she was pretty good at it?
So I initially started getting into cricket because of my brother, and because he was travelling around the country really with Wales and things from a young age, and I was following him. And I just decided that I wanted to join in and play one day, and I went to a couple of training practices and went from there, really. Yeah, I was about 12 when I said that I didn't want to play football anymore, to really put focus on to cricket and follow where I wanted to be, and this led me here today, so I think that was the right decision.
The youngster reflects proudly on her first year in the KSL and is excited to continue her journey with Western Storm.
Obviously, with the difficult year everyone's had, it's really exciting time for not only just cricket in general, but women's cricket, that it's pushing its way through, then that they are able to give out professional contracts to women cricketers, and it's a big step, and it was really proud moment for not just me, but I think the whole of women's cricket. Yeah, the KSL experience was amazing. Like, I had never thought that I'd be able to, at 17, be able to play in front of people in crowds, and be able to play with people like Heather Knight and Anya Shrubsole, who are obviously they're big England women's names, and then you got the likes of Rachel Priest and Smriti Mandhana and Deepti Sharma to play alongside as well. That it was an amazing experience, even if you don't play much. It's just the experience that you get from other players.
Griffis will represent Welsh Fire in the 100, a competition she's excited by, and being the only Welsh player in the team, she feels an added pressure to perform.
Yeah, the fact that it's coming out of Cardiff as well is going to be a really big push for Cricket Wales. I think that it's going to start spreading awareness that there is cricket in Wales, and for young boys, young girls to start joining, and that there's a pathway to follow, and that especially me being Welsh, I think the only Welsh person in the team, I think it's a really big responsibility on my shoulders, but I can show that anyone can get there from Wales just going through the pathway, and I think it's a really, really exciting time.
Archers FM, for students, by the students, at Cardiff Met.
Thank you there, Alex, for giving time out to speak to Tom. And Tom, from that interview, the important thing that I took away from that is that she's the only Welsh representation for the Welsh Fire as well. And she spoke about inspiring not only girls but boys as well. So it's really important as well that we talk about positivity in cricket and in sport. She's going to try and attract an audience that from all genders.
Yeah, absolutely. She's a extremely talented player, and what she's achieved at such a young age, I think it's 18 she is now. Yeah, the people she mentioned in the feature, that she had a night as the England captain for a start, and also Anya Shrubs or people like that who've won World Cup finals, and yeah, she's playing with a great calibre of players at such a young age, and now she's got a chance in the 100. How much she plays, I'm not sure, but she'll be involved, and that'll improve her enormously. And yeah, she's got a great chance now to promote the game in Wales, which has still got a way to go, but I think it's on a positive note. As I mentioned before with cricket, I think it's doing well, and I think she's on that train, she's on that journey with it, and yeah, it's a very encouraging times for her and women's sport.
And just briefly, we'll just touch upon the 100. Are you excited to see something like that for cricket?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, I'm the same as everyone else in that we don't know what it's going to look like. Obviously, we know the format, but we've never had anything like this. Obviously, it's like sort of similar to the T20 Blast or 2020 when it came in all those years ago, and no one knows how it was going to work, and it's turned out to be what it is now, which is great. And we're probably in a similar place with that. I think there's been a lot of opposition to it, but I'm sort of optimistic. I'm not sort of writing it off or going to sing its praises before it's taken place. It'll be interesting. I am a sort of fan of the longer form of the game, but I do, there's still a lot of entertainment to be had, and I get why people are interested and are appealed more to by that form of cricket. So it'll be interesting to see how the 100 goes, and it'll be certainly great to have it here in Cardiff, without a doubt.
And that's for sure for everyone. Obviously, we are predominantly a Welsh audience, but of course, it's all across the UK. So make sure to support Alex Griffis in her venture as she competes for Welsh Fire. So we'll just move on now, and sadly, as we've touched upon, sadly inequality is still happening in the sporting world. And last week, Bristol Bears and Wales International Alicia Butchers had to crowdsource money to fund an operation. The back rower took to social media to raise funds to assist with an operation which would fix ankle ligament damage after sustaining an injury in training with her club side. A target of £5,000 was reached with her employers partially funding the procedure, with the Welsh Rugby Union, the country she represents, saying that they were unable to fund her medical situation as it didn't happen on international duty. Tom, as an avid Welsh rugby fan, we want to see our best players playing for our country, and it's quite an interesting topic, this. Where do you stand on this?
Yeah, it's not ideal, and it's not the story that's going to help women's rugby. Obviously, we've seen a lot of positives with it lately, and it's been improving for sure, but things like these don't help, especially when you see Bristol paying someone like Charles Piatow £1 million a year, and a lot of players sort of around the £500,000 mark. You think, can they just sort of claw that money from somewhere? Obviously, the disappointing thing is, it seems to be that a lot of people have sort of using excuses to sort of say, well, it's not our legal responsibility, it wasn't here, she wasn't, this is the reason why we don't have to do it. And I think, someone a talented player like that, I think it's not ideal. You don't see it in the men's game, and to have to do it itself, it's not a good look for the game, whether you agree with it or not. And yeah, it's really, really not ideal.
And even the positivity probably out of that is just that she said she was just expecting people from her family to donate, but she raises £5,000 in over 6 hours. So it shows that people do care and people want to see Alicia Butchers playing rugby.
Yeah, it shows, that the inequality, as you mentioned, is shown here. And as you briefly touched upon there, within 6 hours on Friday, she had raised £5,071 after a target of £4,995. So it means, she doesn't have to worry about how she'd pay for her operation on Saturday. And the Swansea native, now wants to use her unfortunate experience to educate the others on the insurance gap in women's rugby, and that needs to change. And that's an important talking point as well.
Yeah, most definitely is that we need to learn from these experiences perhaps, and how to manage sporting athletes, because that's a topic that we don't really focus on inside the women's sports. Thing is that with then she's having to pay for that, but if we go to Premier League football or something, if someone gets injured, the club are always supporting them. They'll have in-house doctors, but instead these athletes are having to go privately to other places, or they're having to put their careers on hold if they're waiting for service on the NHS. So Tom, what's your opinion on that, whether they have to go private now?
Yeah, well, I guess a lot of them aren't really left with a choice, compared to what the men's players have, where it's all sort of sorted for them and everything's fine. that just shows how far women's rugby still has to go in women's sport. But obviously in this case, rugby, it's really not great. And I think for it to happen at one of the bigger clubs as well, and the clubs that the men's team have done so well recently, and all the good news that has been around them, they certainly won't have wanted this to sort of come out the way it has. But that was always going to be the story, and unfortunately, that's where we're still at, even though we're improving with women's rugby. But yeah, I think eventually we're going to see that sort of thing wiped out as we come to even more professionalism within the game. But yeah, this is where we're at the moment, unfortunately.
Well, just to give you some insight on that one, Jordan, a full package of medical care was not included in her club contract, and she only discovered after her injury that the personal insurance policy she had taken out was void because she was being paid by the club. Now, she also states that Bristol contributed towards a surgery which wasn't in the contract. It was almost a donation, which she was grateful for, and that Bristol did cover her MRI scan and consultations, which they were contractually obliged to do. So that's one of the points there for you to bring up on.
Yeah, most definitely. We have to say that Bristol Bears did help contribute partially to the procedures as well, and that's the most important thing, is that they have supported it in one way. I think the case here is just offering more support and perhaps more safety for the careers of their players, because sports athletes' careers are quite cut short as well, and for some they can come out of the game early. And Tom, how important is that to protect our athletes?
Yeah, it's vitally important, and it's something which, considering how important it is, maybe it doesn't happen enough and to a large enough extent. I think it's just asking players before they come into the sport, just as they're getting into it, they need to have everything sort of sorted as much as they can, just in case of you have these freak injuries, and yeah, that's where we're currently at, and it's just a case of the athlete being as prepared as possible and having as many plans as possible, and certainly with the current situation with women's rugby, that is what's required.
And Dovgie Howell, previously, you mentioned earlier where he said about the World Cup being moved, and obviously, can players keep it up? Is that perhaps, it gives a bit more time for Alicia to recover a bit for a World Cup, perhaps, because sometimes niggling injuries can affect themselves, and you ain't in contention for the squad anymore because you've got an injury, but it gives them a year then to get over those niggling injuries.
Yeah, I guess that's the positive then. Probably the only one from this scenario is they have enough time. So obviously injuries are just a thing in sport, but yeah, I guess that's a positive for here and for Wales as well.
And so we'll just finish off then. We're going to tell you what's on the television tonight, because you've had our dulcet tones for almost an hour now. So on your telly box this evening is Barrytown United versus Penabont in the Cymru Premier, and former Met man Miles Davis is sure to be involved, having been a key component of Rhys Griffis' side this season. Also in football, the Champions League returns tonight, as well as with Borussia Dortmund taking on Sevilla and Juventus playing FC Porto. The BBC have also been promoting Finding Jack Charlton, which documents the last 18 months of the life of the legendary Island manager, and that's expected to air on our screens later this month. So that's all for today from Archer FM. You've been listening to Jordan, Tom, Ethan. Thank you for joining us today. And that's all from here from Cardiff Met on Cardiff Met Radio. Tune in to the show every day at 2 p.m. for the inside track on sport across your capital city and across the campus. And coming up next is the news and travel. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to hit us up on social media at Cardiff Met Sport TV on Twitter and Cardiff Met Sport TV on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you. Good afternoon.